What's good? It's Woog. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's talk boxing. One of boxing's pound-for-pound best, Mikey Garcia, handled business against inexperienced but tough and undefeated Sergey Lipinets, winning a unanimous decision and taking his share of the junior welterweight title. That's 140, which is now the fourth weight class that Garcia has been a champion in. This was a tough fight. We're used to seeing Garcia not only outbox, but usually destroy and KO his opponents once he starts landing his power shots. This wasn't the case versus a very game Lipinets. While he did win most of the rounds, this was the most competitive fight that we've seen Garcia in recent memory. He got hit more than we normally see him hit. He got bloodied up a bit. And although he did knock Lipinets to the canvas once in the 7th round, Lipinets continued to battle and actually took 4 rounds on one of the judges' scorecards. The other 2 judges gave him 3 rounds, but I really think he won 4 of those rounds. Good fight, and one of the very few that Mikey Garcia didn't totally dominate. Lipinets is a tough pressure fighter who hits hard and has a durable chin. Garcia was a knockout beast in the featherweight, junior lightweight, and lightweight divisions. To avoid confusion, by the way, I'll start calling these weight classes by their weights instead of their names. So Garcia was killing it at 126, 130, and 135. Before jumping to 140, only one of the previous 14 opponents had even made it the distance. But both of his fights at 140 have gone the full 12 rounds. The first versus former 4 division champ Adrian Broner, who's never been stopped before. He's lost, but only by decision. So while you can argue that the level of competition is the reason why Garcia hasn't scored a knockout in his last 2 fights, to me, there's still an open question on whether his power truly carries to 140. I think that it does because when he fought Broner, once Broner tasted Garcia's power, he became totally defensive and looked like he was fighting to survive more than he was to actually win. It kind of reminded me of Shane Mosley when he got dropped by Pacquiao in the first round and fought to survive from then on. Joshua Clottey also turtled up and fought to survive versus Pacquiao. Pac-Man had that kind of effect on opponents during that part of his career. So Garcia had Adrian Broner covering up and fighting to survive and coasted to an easy decision in a fight where many thought that Broner would win because of his size, speed, and durability. Garcia shocked many of us. So the question after this Lipinets fight is what's next for Garcia, who is now campaigning at both 140 and at 135. The bigger opportunities appear to be at 135, especially now that Vasyl Lomachenko, Ring Magazine's number 3 pound-for-pound fighter, is moving up from 130 to 135. The biggest fish for Lomachenko at 130 were Miguel Berchelt and Gervonta Davis. I was kind of disappointed that in his prior weight class at 126, he never faced Leo Santa Cruz or Carl Frampton, but he did beat the supremely athletic Gary Russell Jr., although I'd have loved to see a rematch. At 130, aside from stopping Nicholas Walters, a very dangerous opponent at the time, Lomachenko hasn't fought any of the top 10 fighters in the division. He's instead been fighting journeymen, then gave an aging Hall of Famer, Guillermo Rigondeaux, his first professional loss, though Rigondeaux is 2 weight classes below Lomachenko. To me, that was a mismatch, so miss me with that. Now Lomachenko's next fight should be a very tough test as he makes the climb from 130 to 135 versus champion Jorge Linares, who hasn't lost since 2012 and has been lightweight champ for 4 years now. That's a very tough introduction to a new weight class. Anytime somebody moves up in weight, there's always the question of whether 1, your punch still carries power versus these bigger opponents, and 2, can your chin, head, and body take the punishment that these bigger opponents are looking to dish? We'll find both of those out for Lomachenko at 135, especially since Lomachenko hasn't really been knocking anybody out at 130. His opponents and their cornermen have either been quitting on the stools or throwing in the towel, but they aren't getting laid out on the canvas the way that, say, Mikey Garcia's 130 and 135 opponents have been. So Lomachenko's got a big meal on his plate, but if he does pass that test, then the fight that absolutely needs to happen is Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko. Lomachenko's been looking like the Matrix in his recent fights and has been nearly untouchable, whereas Garcia's a great fundamental boxer who also has devastating power. That's one hell of a matchup. Now Garcia is looking at his options, and the one name that keeps coming up is Terence Crawford, Ring Magazine's number 2 pound-for-pound fighter, who totally cleaned up at 140 and is now at 147 preparing to fight Jeff Horn, the undefeated Aussie who recently won the controversial decision versus Pacquiao last year. As I said, Crawford basically had all the belts at 140, and since he went up in weight, he vacated those titles, and that's how an inexperienced Sergey Lipinets, Garcia's last opponent, could wind up with a belt. He didn't really have to beat any legitimate champion to earn it. So Terence Crawford's been the guy who some want Garcia to fight, but I don't see Garcia making the climb to 147 anytime soon. His trainer and older brother, Robert Garcia, a former champion himself, also said that he wants Mikey to stay at 140, but even more so at 135, where he seems to perform at his very best and is the most dominant. 147 though, that's a whole other mountain to climb, with bigger and better fighters like Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Manny Pacquiao, and now Terence Crawford. Brutal division. So since Garcia versus Crawford is probably a no-go, he'll likely go back down to 135 and try setting up the big fight versus the winner of Lomachenko versus Linares, preferably Lomachenko because of the potential money and magnitude. That'd be great. Other options for Garcia include moving back down to 135 to fight IBF champ Robert Easter, also undefeated, or maybe 135 WBO champ Ray Beltran. The strategy here would be to try stacking titles and make yourself as big a fish as possible to lure the other big fish, Lomachenko, into fighting you, because while these guys do love the competition, they'll usually choose the biggest payoff over the baddest opponent, so Garcia will probably try cleaning up at 135 to stack titles and position himself for the bigger paydays. I really think that those options make more sense than sticking around at 140. At 140, there's Victor Postal, who's more risk than reward. Quality fighter, not a huge name. Probably not worth it. Other than Postal, there's really no one else worth fighting at 140. No names have really emerged there since Crawford pretty much decimated the division, leaving vacant titles and paper champs in his wake. So let's see how Mikey Garcia occupies himself after beating Lipinets for that 140-pound title. Garcia is still the WBC champ at 135, so my guess is that he defends that against another 135-pound champ, while waiting to see how Lomachenko versus Linares plays out. But let me know your thoughts on Garcia, Lomachenko, and the overall landscape at 135 and 140. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Woog, thanks for tuning in.